Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Ashwin Jayaram, part of the Chess Weeb Trinity, and I will be doing a video on king safety. The plan is that we will go through a few Grandmaster games, and I'll explain briefly the importance of king safety and the kinds of mistakes you can make and what can happen if you take it lightly. So the question is, why is king safety important? And the answer is simple enough. Checkmate ends the game, and so it makes sense to protect the king and keep it safe. Make sure nothing really happens to it. So let's go through this game by game. Let's start with a very classical game, a golden oldie if you will. Steinitz van Barteleban. This is probably one of the first games I ever saw as a beginner, and apart from being a very nice tactical skirmish, it was it also showed it was also a very good example of why the king should immediately be tucked into the king side or queen side. So it started off early enough over here in this Gyuko piano position. Now the theory usually is knight takes e4, castle, bishop takes d5. But over here, he played d5 immediately, which looks normal enough. Black tries to open the center, get his pieces out. However, this move is actually quite an inaccuracy. Because after e takes d5, knight takes d5 castle, now white's king is nice and safe, and black's king is open in the center. Now it seems like it's not too big of a deal, because it looks like the king is just one move away from castling. However, this one move is difficult to attain, especially since right now this piece is threatened. And the king in the center is, it's going to face a certain amount of threats. Now, taking over here, it looks simple. It looks like you can just win a pawn. However, this is not something that really works. Now the king in the center is in real trouble after bishop takes f7 and bishop a3 check. So black plays bishop e6, and again he thinks, okay, it's not so bad. White is one tempo away. Black is one tempo away from just castling. However, the position after bishop g5, bishop e7, takes on d5, takes on d5, takes on d5, bishop takes e7, knight takes e7. This position is reached by force. And again, it looks like a very reasonable position for black. Black is one tempo away from castling, and everything looks nice and simple. However, white can play rook e1, forcing the king to stay in the center for just a little longer because of the pressure on the e7 knight. So if black could just somehow protect this knight and castle, it would be alright. However, white is not going to allow this to happen. So now black goes f6, controlling the e5 square, and also having ideas of maybe getting the king out by f7. So here, white played queen e2, queen d7, protecting the knight, rook a c1, c6. Now this position, black is very close to getting his king outside to f7. And now if the king can manage to get to f7, then the king is actually not doing too badly. Because after king f7, the rooks are connected. There are no immediate threats. Black has the outpost on d5, so the king would be safe. So white found a way to introduce some more pieces into the attack before the king gets to safety. Here, white played d5. This move, it tries to open the center some more, and it tries to get the knight to the e6 square immediately. So here, black played c takes d5, knight d4, king f7, knight e6. So now white has sacrificed a pawn. However, all of white's pieces are very powerful. The knight on e6 is a true monster, and white is threatening rook c7. So, uh, apart from these threats, it's also clear that the black's king is extremely vulnerable, and black still has to deal with these threats. So, here black plays rook hc8, and in this position, white has launched a very forcing mating attack, or an attack that wins at least a lot of material. When I first saw this game, I think I was probably 10, and even then, I was while I was trying to learn and grasp how chess worked, this game really made a significant influence on me, because it was very interesting to see how these calculations were performed. So here, white played queen g4, threatening g7, and also putting some pressure on the unprotected queen over here. Now black played g6. Now, this is one of those situations where if black just has one more tempo, then black is doing fine. In this entire game so far, if black just had one extra move, it would have been absolutely fine. And in this position, that also means that white has to play very quickly. If white plays a slow move and gives black that one tempo, then black is doing fine. So every move white makes here is a very precise move. White played knight g5 check, also doing a discovery attack on the queen. King e8, rook takes e7 check, which is a really cool move to make. Also, because if queen takes e7, then rook takes c8 is just a win. However, after rook takes e7, black had the really cool king f8. This looks shocking, but then you would notice that all of white's pieces are hanging. The queen on g4, the rook on e7, the rook on c1, and even the knight on g5. And the rook on c1 is the biggest threat over here, because rook takes c1 is a back rank checkmate. So over here, white again managed to play the correct move, rook f7 check. And black can ignore it again. And here, white played the really impressive rook g7 check. And the point being that if queen takes g7, then rook takes c8 wins material. So king h8, rook takes h7, and over here, black resigned, but I think this position just forced mate after rook g7 check, queen h4, queen h7, and just in the end checkmate on d6. This is one game where the king was stuck in the center and it got rather brutally exploited. This game was Aronian Kramnik from 2018. And over here, white has a very normal position. It's a standard Berlin opening. White could make a ton of moves here. White could play bishop e3. White could play knight bd2, rook e1. There are a lot of playable moves here. But here, white played h3. Ordinarily, it's not so bad. It prevents bishop g4. However, this move was actually, it turns out that this move was actually, it caused a lot of problems for white. Because here, black was able to play rook g8 and exploit this h3 weakness over here. Black's plan is simple enough. Black just wants to open some lines in the king with g5, g4. And this, we can look at the next few moves to see how this ended up. Even if white plays a normal move like c3, black is just going to go g5. And it's difficult to take this pawn, because taking this pawn, it just opens the g file, and and the king right in front of it. Probably just a move like h6 is already good enough, and the entire king side is weak. So white played king h1, getting the king off the g file, and black just played knight h5. Again, threatening g5, and maybe even getting the knight to f4. So the attack progressed a few moves later. c3, g5, knight takes e5, g4, d4, bishop d6. At this position, it's clear that black is doing very well. White's entire queen side is not developed. All of black's pieces are pointing towards the king side. White's king is exposed. And black went on to win this game in rather spectacular style. Even a rather innocuous move like h3, it's a move that you have to make with great, you have to be very careful when making moves like this. If black's king had already castled on the king side, let's say for example rook e1 was played, and black castled, now a move like h3 would be rather safe because black doesn't have to worry. White doesn't have to worry about g5. So generally, as a matter of principle, be very careful when moving pawns in front of your king, especially when your opponent's king hasn't castled or is castled on the opposite side. This is also a theme in many Gyuko piano positions, and perhaps we can see more of those themes in a later game. Even without a weakening move like a3 or h3, the king can still be perceived to be rather weak. Let's see a rather typical opening that could happen. e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, e5, knight of d7, f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop e3, bishop e7. So this is the Steinitz variation of the French defense. Over here, white and black have several options, and there are many different variants that could lead to very interesting games. And over here, after queen d2 castle, one of the more natural moves in this position is to play queenside castles right here. Unfortunately, in this position, queenside castles is almost a decisive mistake. It shouldn't look. At first it doesn't look so bad for white, because black castle kingside, white castle queenside, and perhaps it just looks like the better attacker wins. However, after c4, it's clear that, practice has shown that the attack is extremely dangerous for white. I think out of all the games played, I think perhaps 90-95% of them have been won by black here. It's which at first looks surprising. However, timing is what makes the difference here. Black's attack has already started, and white's attack is yet to have started. The pawn on c4 is a significant move that black can use to attack, especially later on after b5, b4. And white doesn't have anything near as close. Perhaps if white's pawn was already on h5, then this position would be already quite complicated. But here, black is several tempos ahead, and perhaps if you'd like, you can just look at the Grandmaster games here. I think there are hundreds of games, and black has won most of them. So already, it can be said that even though the king is, the king is surrounded by pieces, the king doesn't have any weaknesses. The king is rather unsafe because of black's upcoming attack after b5. This position was reached in the game of Sisian Kasparov in the year 2000. Now this position is white to play, and perhaps it may not seem so obvious, but black actually has a very powerful threat here. Black wants to take rook takes c3 and sacrifice the exchange. Now, if you calculate, you would see that rook takes c3 doesn't seem to win anything back immediately. Rook takes c3 is in fact just a long-term exchange sacrifice. And over here, it turns out that black doesn't even need to have anything concrete, but the threat of rook takes a4 is good enough. Rook takes c3 is good enough for white to be severely concerned. White should have immediately moved the knight away, and the game would have remained complicated. But here, white played this normal developing move, and black, Kasparov, obviously being Kasparov, saw no problem in just taking rook takes c3 immediately. And in this position, at first it looks like it shouldn't be too bad for white. White is, after all, an exchange up, and black hasn't even fully completed development. But just this weakened kingside means that black can take his time to build an attack on the queen side. For example, black just played casually queen c7, knight e2, and bishop e7, get the pieces out. White tried to build an attack, g5, castle, h4, but now black can just bring his pieces towards the king side. Knight a4, bishop c1, knight e5, h5. Now it looks like white is also getting his attack on, with g6 being played next, but black can just ignore it and play d5. Queen h2, bishop d6, queen h3, knight takes d3, c takes d3, b4. And already it's clear that white's king's position has been stripped open. Black's pieces are coming in the way, and the game didn't last that much longer. After c takes b4, rook c8, king a1, d takes e4, f takes e4, bishop takes e4. And Kasparov just swept up the board soon after this. So, one of the situations where you have to be especially careful with your king safety is when there's the possibility of opposite side castling. Over here, it's clear that what black is going to castle on the king side. So white should have been extra sensitive about any king side weaknesses. And black clearly took his chance immediately when being offered this exchange sacrifice that weakened white's king side. This next game was in Tregyubov-Moisenko. This is, again, a different type of king safety that I thought I'd touch upon more briefly. Over here, black has a few pieces that are pointing towards the king side. You have the queen. You have this bishop that's pointing here. You have the rook that could come over here. And you have the knight that also could, get nearby. So this is the case where both sides have been castled the king side. White has not made any weaknesses. He hasn't pushed any pawns on the king side. But in this position, white's main issue is that he does not have that many pieces near the king side. Over here, black has several pieces that point towards white's king. And white has, apart from the pawns in front of the king, white just only has the bishop. But still, white is doing fine if white can see black's threat. So here, white would have done alright if he had played f3. At first, it looks like this move is counterintuitive. After all, you don't want to move pawns in front of your king, and this moves a pawn in front of the king and weakens this e3 pawn. However, the point of this move is that it blunts this bishop over here, and also, you could say it also blunts the knight, because now the knight can't go anywhere near the king. So after this move, white would have still been doing quite alright. However, white played queen c7. It looks like a normal attacking move, attacking the bishop, putting some pressure over here, maybe even some pressure over here eventually. But white played this move and he missed the powerful knight f3 check. Yeah, knight of 3 check, and now white's king is ripped open. So white played bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. Now if white took takes f3, then it's almost immediate checkmate after rook g6 and queen h3, with checkmate on h3 and g2. So here white played queen c4, pinning the rook. And white seems to be reconciling himself with just giving up the exchange. I think this was a rapid game, so white figured that if he could at least just give up material, he could still have a fighting chance. And so here, black played d5. Rook takes d5. Now, black is still doing well if he takes the exchange, but he had the significantly more powerful queen h3. This move looks shocking, but it ends the game. White resigned immediately. This move rips open white's king and forces significant material loss. Here, black is simply threatening queen g2 mate, and if white takes h3, then black goes rook g6 check. And here, white has nothing better than to block with the queen g4. Black plays f takes g4, also threatening g takes h3 checkmate. So white would have to play h4 to make sure that the g file doesn't open, and black can just pick up the rook over here. So it's important to note that even if you're castled on the king side, your opponent is castled on the king side, and you haven't made any weaknesses in front of your king, it's still worth having some pieces around your king to defend it. For example, let's say instead of this rook, there was a knight. Then you can imagine the sheer number of situations where knight g3 would have defended everything. Like over here, if there was a knight on f1, of course h2 would be protected and knight g3 would also be there. This is the game Zhao Jun versus Xiu Deshun. I hope that's how you pronounce their names. From the year 2011, where this is an example of everything that can go wrong with kingside safety. We'd previously seen what would happen when the king is weak, or when there aren't enough pieces that are near the king to defend. And here we can see what happens when both are the case. So this was a position that happened. Here white is threatening e5 to win the piece, and even apart from that, this pin is very annoying. It would be nice if black can bring the knight to d7, protect the knight so that the queen can get out of the way, but that's not the case. So if the queen moves to c7 or wherever, then white can just take on f6 and weaken the king's position. So here black felt as if he had no other option, and black played g5 to stop this pin. However, as you can see, g5 is a very weakening move. There are some situations where black can play g5. However, in this situation, one of the simplest ways to figure out that it's not doable is because black does not have a dark squared bishop. If black had a dark square bishop, then a move like g5 would not be as bad as it is here. Because after, let's say, for example, there's a bishop on g7, then this bishop would protect the king and also stop a lot of threats at the same time. Here, black pushes a pawn in front of his king and doesn't have enough pieces around the king to defend that position. So here, white played bishop g3, also threatening bishop d6, so black played d6. And here white played f4, but white could have also played h4, trying to open some lines around the king, open a line for the h file, and this probably would have been actually more effective. And so we'll go through this game briefly, but we can see that over here, black should make the king's defense his first priority. Now black should have played knight h5. For f4, black should have played knight h5 to try and, let's say, bring at least the queen to the defense. and try and create some complications. However, black played knight a5 to win the c4 pawn. Winning the c4 pawn is often a typical idea in these kinds of Nimzo Indians. However, this is neither the time or the place because of the weakness of the king. So white opened the king side a little bit and castled, now threatening bishop takes d6. Black played knight h5, to which white played bishop takes d6 anyway. So in this position, there aren't sufficient pieces around black's king. So white tries to open lines, further lines into black's king, and also cut off the defense. This happened after queen takes e7, e5, queen e7, knight g3, trying to chase away the only piece left defending the king, knight takes g3. And here white played rook f6. This move is very important because the aim of this move is basically to make sure that black cannot bring any pieces to the king's defense. If white would have played h takes g3, then black could have gone f5, and the queen would have come to black's king's defense. Black is still in a lot of trouble, but this position is a lot easier to defend. So the move rook f6, it cuts off black's defense and brings one more piece into the attack. So now at this current position, black is two knights up. However, this does not mean anything because as you can see, white has two pieces near the king. The queen is just one move away, and black barely has a knight that defends the king. There are other pieces that are still on the queen side. We could almost say that white is up material here. So black played king g7. If knight f5, trying to keep the piece, then white can just white pretty much checkmates by force over here. So king g7, queen g4, bringing more pieces into the attack. Rook g8, h takes g3. Now white is only a piece down, and black had a little bit more defense around the king, but still not enough. You would notice that usually when sacrificing a piece, you want to play as forcing as possible to not give your opponent any counterplay. However, in this position, you can see that white is playing very casually. He just takes back his piece. Next move, he's just going to bring his rook to the game, and black can't really do that much about it because the king is so unsafe and all the white's pieces are active. White does not have to rush this position. So black played knight b7, trying to defend the f7 weakness with knight d8. White just brings one more piece into the board. Knight d8. Now white plays queen e4, threatening the a8 rook and threatening queen h7 check. Continuing the attack. Black plays queen b7, trying to offer a trade. White simply plays d5, pushing his pawn, stopping the queen from getting exchanged, and also adding another piece to the attack. You could say that the d5 and e5 pawns are now also part of the attack, apart from the other pieces on f6, f1, e4, and d3. So black played rook h8, trying to prevent queen h7 check. However, in this position, white has several ways to win this position, but he chose the prettiest way to win. White played queen g6 check, sacrificing the queen. Black has no option but to take, and white has a forced checkmate after rook takes g6, king h7, rook g5 check, king h6, rook g6 check, king h7. If black goes king h5 instead, then white can checkmate with g4 check, king h4, king h2, threatening g3 checkmate. So here black played king h7, and it was checkmate after rook g4, king h6, rook f6, king h5, rook h4 check, and it's going to be checkmate after next move, rook g6 checkmate. So these are some examples of where king safety was major issue, and one side got brutally punished for being lax about it. So to recap, in this game, Black's main issue with King's safety was that the King was stuck in the middle of the board. If in this position, if Black just had one extra move, the King goes to safety, and if anything, Black has the advantage here. However, White is always one tempo up. White was always able to put sufficient pressure to ensure that the King could never castle, and White was able to bring his pieces closer to Black's King, and the combination of threats were just too much for Black to handle. In the next game, White had a very normal position. White just made one careless move h3, and this invited Black to launch an attack and open some lines in the King. Which this should show that when your opponent's King has not yet committed which side he's going to castle in, you still want to be really careful about pushing your pawns in front of your King and giving your opponent a hook to open lines. Over here, if Black's King had already, if let's say White made a normal move and Black castles, then White can just play h3 without really being afraid of any g5 attacks. But with the King still on e8 and with Black still having the option to castle queenside, White was careless in playing h3, and Black was subsequently created a huge attack and got a very commanding position, which he ended up winning, as you can see, in a rather epic manner. A very normal situation, a seemingly normal situation, where this time White seems to have done nothing wrong at all, because he castled on opposite side. There are pieces surrounding Black's surrounding his King. He has not made any pawn weaknesses, and yet White's last move, queenside castles, is almost effectively a losing move after the move c4. Simply because now White has, you could say that White has castled into the attack. The pawn on c4 is already a significant wedge in Black's position, and Black is simply going to play b5, b4, and rip open White's kingside, whereas White's kingside attack hasn't really started. White can maybe go f5, at best go f6. However, none of White's pieces are really pointing towards Black's King, and you could say that the knight, the bishop, the queen, even the rook, they're not that far off from attacking White's King. So sometimes you want to be careful not to castle into the attack. This example showed that, again, you can not really make any weaknesses in front of your King. As you can see, White hasn't pushed any of his King. The King seems safe. However, in this position, Black is threatening rook takes c3. Black wants to rip open the king side by force, even if it means sacrificing in exchange. And this was sort of a long-term sacrifice, in the sense that, you know, by allowing this exchange sacrifice, Black didn't even need to play quickly. Black could even just take his time and then build his attack slowly. Black could even afford to allow White to advance his pawn so far, but Black's attack was always several steps ahead. So this is an example of being very careful to not allow any such exchange sacrifices. Because even in other versions, there are many situations where, let's say, Black is castled kingside and White has the option of taking rook takes f6. So this is often a rather thematic way of weakening White's king. And this position is an example of, again, White having no real weaknesses around the king, and however, the main issue being that White does not have any pieces around the king to defend. And because while Black had several pieces around the vicinity of the king, White only really has the pawns and the bishop. So white should have realized that something was afoot and tried to make sure that any threats were handled. And because white was probably complacent of black's threats, he ended up facing this really cool queen sacrifice. This game, the one that we saw in the end, it's an example of everything that can go wrong. Weakening the king in front of you without enough pieces defending it. In the end, white had so many ways to get an advantage. White could have played h4 here. I think even here, I seem to recall a move like even knight f4, I think was a very easy way for white to win. But in the end, white was able to sacrifice 2 knights and play casually because black had no activity and black's king was ripped open and black had no pieces defending the king. And in the end, black also had to face a rather nice queen sacrifice. So apart from the instructional value of these games, I hope you also found the tactics to be fun. It's always nice to see queen sacrifices that end the game immediately. So I hope you also found those tactics to be fun. So these were examples of king safety, and I hope you like them. And if you like this video, please click the like button and click subscribe also, and also click the bell button to receive notifications of any of our future videos. If you have any comments or feedback, please send a comment over here, or you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And I think we should also have our Discord address in the description below. You can also follow us there and let us know about any thoughts that you could have on the video, or thoughts you could have in future videos or future topics to cover. And we also stream a lot on Twitch. So you could follow us at Just Weeb on Twitch and see our upcoming streams. I think we stream a lot more often than we upload. So you can try and see us solve Puzzle Rush. You can try and see us play a lot of Blitz and Bullet games. And that's it. So this is Grandmaster Ashwin Jayaram signing off. I'll see you guys later.